The Paraprosdokian technique is this.
I would take a bullet for you. I could never love anything as much as I love you. I would say that to my wife, and then the second I looked in that baby's eyes, I knew in that exact moment that if we were ever under attack, I would use my wife as a human shield to protect that baby.
Now, why was that story funny? That's where this technique comes into the picture. Firstly, what does this insanely difficult word to pronounce even mean? It's simply a figure of speech, which means that when you have a story, a phrase, or a sentence, you change the ending to something that's unexpected and surprising. That's all it means. But the element of unexpectedness is critical in humor. Here's a clip by one of my favorite comedians, Ricky Gervais, doing just that.
And I remember I was out with my sister, I was about 8. She was about 20. It was her and her boyfriend, and they drove me out to the woods and they let me play. And I found a perfect little shed snake skin. And I loved this, and I was playing with it. And she's saying, "Put it down. It's got germs and everything." And I realised she was scared of this snake skin, so I started teasing her, right? So I'm chasing around my 20-year-old. I'm 8, right? She's laughing and going, "You're not getting in the car with that." And she made me leave it there, okay? So years later, I was about 14 or 15, and I had my mates round, and I was teasing her to my mates, saying, "Oh, she was scared of snakes. I was chasing her around with the snakes because she was scared." And she chose that time to tell me that I'd actually been running around with a used condom.
Oh my God. Okay, now how do you and I use this technique to make other people laugh and to just make our stories and conversations a lot more interesting? Well, it's quite simple. We just have to be funny as people. No, but seriously, let's break that down. There are 3 things that we can do to use this technique in conversations and storytelling. Let's take an example by Jennifer Lawrence. It starts by the first step, which is setting the scene. We can usually do this by talking in a bland, matter-of-fact tone of voice and talk about something that's very normal. In this particular example, Jennifer Lawrence is talking about how she's in Paris for some fancy event, like how celebrities usually are, and she happens to run into one of her favorite film directors.
It really was Francis Ford Coppola.
Godfather, I mean, come on.
Yeah, I know. So I was like, oh, so I debated the whole time, like, do I go up to him, do I not go up? And then finally I was like, I have to, or I'll regret it for the rest of my life.
And this is at a restaurant?
At a restaurant in Paris, and he's at a giant group of people, and they take up most of, it's a huge table of people.
Now, after the scene is set, okay, the audience knows things are nice, they're normal. Someone's just run into somebody who they really look up to. But then we bring in the second point, which is the build-up.
And I started walking, and I noticed I was barefoot, but I was like, maybe they probably won't notice. And so I'm barefoot, but I introduced myself, and I was like, I'm such a huge fan. Godfather, and went on, and then introduced myself to the whole table. Hi, I'm Jennifer Lawrence. They had no idea who I was. And
Now, we don't know what we're building up to. The main motive we have to keep in our minds is that we're trying to show the audience that this normal situation is turning into something a little more important. So you build it up, and you finally have the reveal.
Went back to the table. My entire dress was unzipped, and my thong was out. So I was barefoot, and my whole ass was out.
Does that just happen? I don't know how that happened with dresses.
Now, this particular story might not sound that funny because I completely broke it up and ruined the funny element, but the principle still applies. Setting the scene, using a build-up to create tension, and finally having an unexpected reveal. Now, unexpected does not have to be like a mystery or something completely out of the picture. Jennifer Lawrence's story is something that's just purely embarrassing, and the audience did not expect such a surprising ending. We can also try throwing in a few subtle pauses to make our punchline even punchier, if that's a word.
I once dated a girl who owned a parakeet. Oh my God. That fucking thing never shut up. But the bird was cool.
Now, I know this principle is easier said than done, but there are a couple of things we can keep in mind to make sure we are getting better at this. The first thing is, in most situations, do not use this when we meet somebody for the first time. Stories are not just funny because of the words that we say, but because of the personalities that we carry. And when somebody is not familiar with that personality, these jokes which have unexpected twists and turns can sometimes fall flat. It's happened to me before, and it was just a little embarrassing, and we don't want that for anybody else. And the second thing to keep in mind is to make sure that we're keeping an eye out for funny things that happen in our lives. Just being aware of them. Things happen to us all the time, and it's when we can understand what was funny about them that we actually have one of these stories. Remember that all of these stories that you heard were simply personal experiences that people had in their past. And they could have looked at the negative side of it. Jennifer Lawrence could have looked at the fact that what happened to her was actually embarrassing and not funny. But she chose to give it a different spin and made it a very interesting thing to talk about. And that's what we have to keep an eye out for as well. You don't have to be a writer or a comedian. You just need to be aware of situations that happen in our lives and look at the funny aspect of them. Then it simply comes down to setting the scene, creating build-up, and finally having a reveal. This is a great technique to use in conversations, but if you want to become a more engaging storyteller, there are certain tactics that you can use regardless of whether you want to use humor or even just a normal story to have an engaging conversation. We've broken down a few of these tactics, which you can check out in a video that we made right here.